Hello everybody, welcome back. Today we're going to talk about session 29, and we've got another kind of heady physics-oriented type session that just gives me a tiny bit of anxiety because I am not studied in physics personally. I never took a physics class even in high school, and it's never been something that's interested me. I actually, in my sophomore year, signed up for AP Physics, and on the first day, we got like pages and pages of equations to do, and I just couldn't face a whole semester of that. I was always pretty good at math, but I just don't like math. I don't like doing the same equation with different variables dozens of times over and over. That's just very fatiguing for me. So I dropped AP Physics, and I instead took AP Environmental Science. So if we're ever talking about ecology or biology, I'll feel a little bit more confident. So just bear with me. I apologize for that gap in my knowledge, but I will still try to do my best to explain what Ra and Dawn are talking about within the limits of my own consciousness. So let's go ahead and get started, because we got lots of fun stuff to talk about. I am Ra. I greet you in the love and in the light of the infinite creator. We communicate now. Questioner. Is our sun, this planetary system, as we know it, a sub-Logos or the physical manifestation of a sub-Logos? I am Ra. This is correct. Questioner. Then I am assuming this sub-Logos created this planetary system in all of its densities. Is this correct? I am Ra. This is incorrect. The sub-Logos of your solar entity differentiated some experiential components within the patterns of intelligent energy set in motion by the Logos, which created the basic conditions and vibratory rates consistent throughout your, what you have called, major galaxy. So here, Dawn's just trying to figure out how our physical reality has been created. And Ra's saying that our physical reality isn't created by our sub-Logos, by the sun. The rules of our physical reality aren't created by our sun, but the actual greater Logos of the Milky Way creates the systems that unfold into the densities. And then the sub-Logos, our sun and all the other suns, do create, here Ra says, differentiated some experiential components within the patterns of intelligent energy set in motion by the Logos. So again, we talked about this a little bit last time. The Logos is the big circle, and our sun is just one little circle inside of that big circle, if we're making a Venn diagram. Our sub-Logos would be completely inside the big circle of the Logos of the Milky Way, as would all of the other stars. And some of the sub-Logoi might overlap with each other because there are some similarities, but each sub-Logos takes on its own version of the potentials that the Logos has set in motion. So again, in general, we're talking about the archetypal mind. The Logos sets up these parameters for the experiences that it wants to explore, and then each sub-Logos creates and designs its own version within the parameters that are set up by the greater Logos. So the sub-Logos doesn't create the physical reality. The physical reality is the same throughout the whole Logos, but the sub-Logos has some differentiation of experiential components, as Ra puts it. So 29.3, Dawn asks, then is this sub-Logos, which is our sun, the same sub-Logos, but just manifesting in different parts through the galaxy, which is it all the stars in this galaxy? I am Ra. Please restate. That was a kind of incomprehensible question from Dawn, but here Dawn's going to ask a slightly different question that actually makes sense. So 29.4, Dawn says, what I'm saying is there are roughly 250 billion stars or suns, something like ours, in this major galaxy. Are they all part of the same sub-Logos? I am Ra. They are all part of the same Logos. Your solar system, as you would call it, is a manifestation somewhat and slightly different due to the presence of a sub-Logos. So again, all the stars in the Milky Way are part of the Milky Way logos. Our sun is just one sub-Logos of that Milky Way. Again, we're talking about kind of like nesting dolls, where there's the logos, the sub-Logos, and then we are sub-sub-Logos, and we're going to keep going into that a little bit more here as well. So 29.5, Dawn says, now all of these, let me be sure I'm right then. Then our sun is a sub-Logos of the Logos that is the major galactic Logos, correct? I am Ra, this is correct. Questioner, are there any sub-sub-Logos that are found in our planetary system that are Logos that are sub to our sun? I am Ra, this is correct. Questioner, would you tell me what one of these? Would you give me an example of one of those? I'll call sub-sub-Logos. I am Ra. One example is your mind-body-spirit complex. So again, we are sub-sub-Logos, creating a differentiated experiential components within the patterns of intelligent energy set in motion by the Logos. We are creators in our own right, but we do have certain parameters that are set up by the Logos that we have to operate our potentials within. So in 29.8 then, Dawn says, then every entity that exists would be some type of sub or sub-sub-Logos. Is this correct? I am Ra. This is correct down to the limits of any observation, for the entire creation is alive. So I do think I mentioned this before too, that, I think of the sub-sub-sub-Logos that are on our body, the billions, maybe even trillions of microorganisms that exist on and within our body complex. Because as a mind-body-spirit complex that lives here on Earth, there are actually more single-celled organisms that make up our body complex than actual cells that are a part of our body complex. So that always expands my mind in infinite directions when I think about that and how I am just the planetary body of all of these other single-celled entities that are living and eating and dying upon me. So we're all each an individual planetary entity with our own creatures that we need to take care of and send love to and work in a cooperative manner with. So 29.9, Dawn asks, then the planet which we walk upon here would be some form of sub-sub-Logos. Is this correct? I am Ra. A planetary entity is so named only as Logos if it is working in harmonic fashion with entities or mind-body complexes upon its surface or within its electromagnetic field. Questioner. Okay, do the sub-Logos, such as our sun, do any of them, in our major galaxy, do they have a metaphysical polarity, shall we say, positive or negative as we've been using this term? I am Ra. As you use the term, this is not so. Entities through the level of planetary have the strength of intelligent infinity through the use of free will, going through the actions of beingness. The polarity is not, thusly, as you understand polarity. It is only when the planetary sphere begins harmonically interacting with mind-body complexes, and more especially mind-body-spirit complexes, that planetary spheres take on distortions due to the thought complexes of entities interacting with the planetary entity. The creation of the one infinite creator does not have the polarity that you speak of. So, I think this is an important concept. It's one I've thought about a lot in recent times. Essentially here, what Ra is saying is that planets do not become a sub-Logos or a sub-sub-Logos until fourth density. Essentially until there is a social memory complex where the planet is then interacting harmonically with the entities that are on the planet. And Ra qualifies especially mind-body-spirit complexes, which is third density entities, but also says mind-body complexes, which is second density entities, and potentially first density entities as well. So a planet does not have a consciousness until there is a collective consciousness of the entities that are living on that planet. And also, the sub-Logoi that are the suns, they do not have polarity. They do not choose whether they're positive or negative. Later on, we talk about how some Logoi have biases towards the positive polarity, like ours does, and some have no bias. But it's not really possible for a logos to be biased toward the negative polarity, because essentially that would be an infringement upon the free will of all of the entities who would exist within that logos. There's no way for a sun to have negative desires and then create an experiential nexus for beings to live within that, because again, that's just a reality without free will. So Ross says that there really isn't polarity as we know it. There aren't good stars and bad stars, but there are good planets and temporarily bad planets, because when I'm using good and bad in the most literal sense, I guess, in a way that, I'm simplifying things. But when we have a planet that ascends into fourth density positive, then that sub-sub-Logos of the planet is a positive entity. And if we have a planet that ascends into fourth density negative, then that sub-sub-Logos of that planet would be a negative entity. Of course, Rod does use the word harmonically, and it's hard to imagine harmony in the negative densities. So I'm not sure if that then negates the potential for a planet to be negative because there isn't harmony. But, there are fourth density social memory complexes, so they have some version of harmony where they interact as a group consciousness. And then I'm assuming the planet becomes a part of that. So, Ross says that only 10% of our creation really harvests on the negative path. And I don't think that necessarily means 10% of third density planets harvest negative, because a lot of planets have mixed harvests where it's mostly positive. But Rod does actually give those numbers at some point. I just kind of dismiss that part because those specific numbers, Rod's really bad with the numbers. So you can't really give a ton of weight to the numbers that Rod gives most of the time, especially when they're really specific. Like when Dawn is asking about what percentage of third density planets are negative, all that stuff. But to summarize, a planetary entity does not truly become a sub-sub-Logos until it's acting harmonically with the entities on the planet. So like I said, I believe that implies the transition into fourth density when the mind-body-spirit complexes create a group mind and then truly recognize how that group mind is directly affecting the planet. And I think essentially it becomes one thing. The planetary mind and body becomes a part of the social memory complex of fourth density. That's how I interpret that part. I hope it makes a bit of sense. So we'll move on to 2911. Don says, thank you. Yesterday you stated that planets in first density are in a timeless state to begin with. Can you tell me how the effect we appreciate as time comes into being? I am Ra. We have just described to you the state of beingness of each logos. The process by which space-time comes into continuum form is a function of the careful building, shall we say, of an entire or whole plan of vibratory rates, densities, and potentials. When this plan has coalesced in the thought complexes of love, then the physical manifestations begin to appear, this first manifestation stage being awareness or consciousness. At the point at which this coalescence is at the livingness or beingness point, the point or fountainhead of beginning, space-time then begins to unroll its scroll of livingness. So I feel like that's a very poetic answer from Ra for a very specific question that Dawn asks. But essentially, there isn't a better way to answer the question, I would guess. At some point, as the creation becomes more aware of itself, the first stage is awareness or consciousness, and then the coalescence begins the stage of livingness or beingness. And once that second stage begins, that's when space-time also begins. So, 2912, Don says, as the love creates the vibration, I will make this statement first. Let me say, I believe that love creates the vibration in space-time in order to form the photon. Is this correct? I am Ra. This is essentially correct. Questioner. Then the continued application of love. I will assume this is directed by a sub-Logos or sub-sub-Logos. This continued application of love creates rotations of these vibrations, which are in discrete units of angular velocity. This then creates chemical elements in our physical illusion, and I will assume the elements in the other, or what we would call non-physical or other densities in the illusion. Is this correct? I am Ra. The Logos creates all densities. Your question was unclear. However, we shall state that the Logos does create both the space-time densities and the accompanying time-space densities. So, again, Ra and Dawn are kind of having trouble coming to communicating with language. This is all very beyond the language that we already have. But again, Ra says that Logos is love, and love is Logos. These two words are essentially interchangeable. So I think Dawn is seeing these two things as separate, seeing the energy of love, the prime mover, as a separate energy than that of the Logos, but they're the same energy. The Logos is love, and through that beingness of love creates all of the densities, whether they're space-time, the physical densities, or time-space, the metaphysical densities. All of these are created by the Logos. So 2914, Dawn tries to clarify and says, what I am assuming is that the rotations, the quantized incremental rotations of the vibrations, show up as the material of these densities. Is this correct? I am Ra. This is essentially correct. So again, love acting on photons creates a certain vibrational frequency. Those vibrational frequencies create the elements, and then as we know, those elements are then the building blocks of the physical reality that manifests. So 2915, Dawn asks, well, then, because of these rotations, there is an inward motion of these particles, which is opposite the direction of space-time progression, the way I understand it. And this inward progression, then, is seen by us as what we call gravity. Is this correct? I am Ra. This is incorrect. Questioner, can you tell me how the gravity comes about? I am Ra. This that you speak of as gravity may be seen as the pressing towards the inner light love, the seeking towards the spiral line of light which progresses towards the Creator. This is a manifestation of a spiritual event or condition of livingness. So spiritual gravity is something that Ra talks more and more about. And basically, the more you go inward, the more you seek the Creator within yourself and understand that expression, that unique expression of the Creator and its infinite potentials, you build this spiritual gravity that then continues to pull you inward more and more. And Ra says that the physical gravity we experience is a manifestation of that spiritual gravity. And we're going to go on here and talk a little bit more about that. Dawn says, now, gravity we know now on our moon is less than it is upon our planet here. Is there a metaphysical principle behind this that you could explain? I am Ra. The metaphysical and physical are inseparable. Thus, that of which you spoke, which attempts to explain this phenomenon, is able to, shall we say, calculate the gravitational force of most objects due to the various physical aspects, such as what you know of as mass. However, we felt it was necessary to indicate the corresponding and equally important metaphysical nature of gravity. Questioner, I sometimes have difficulty in getting, you might say, a foothold into what I'm looking for in trying to seek out the metaphysical principles, you might say, behind our physical illusion. Could you give me an example of the amount of gravity in the third density conditions at the surface of the planet Venus? Would it be greater or less than Earth? I am Ra. The gravity, shall we say, the attractive force, which we also describe as the pressing outward force towards the Creator, is greater spiritually upon the entity you call Venus due to the greater degree of success, shall we say, at seeking the Creator. This point only becomes important when you consider that all of creation in its infinity has reached a spiritual gravitational mass of sufficient nature. The entire creation infinitely coalesces, the light seeking and finding its source and thusly ending the creation and beginning a new creation, much as you consider the black hole, as you call it, with its conditions of infinitely great mass at the 0 point from which no light may be seen as it has been absorbed. So, I believe here Ra is saying, because we're about ready to reveal this as well, that as spiritual gravity increases, the actual gravity that we measure as a physical force doesn't change that much. It changes a little bit, and we don't really have the instrumentation to measure the changes that happens. But I believe essentially what Ra is saying, that physical force of gravity really only becomes important as we all begin to coalesce into what we perceive as the black hole that is late 7th density pushing towards 8th density, which then becomes the next octave. So we have a supermassive black hole at the center of the Milky Way galaxy, and that is then the physical manifestation of the 7th density of this octave, where everything is coalescing into that black hole. And eventually, then, I'm assuming the entire Logos will enter into that black hole, and then whatever comes out the other side is the next octave. And so here Ra, again, like I said, I believe what Ra is saying. This point only becomes important when you consider that all of creation in its infinity has reached a spiritual gravitational mass of sufficient nature. The entire creation infinitely coalesces. So that's when physical gravity and the measurement and how that manifests is actually a way that we can see and measure and correlate with the spiritual gravity that has been accumulated. Otherwise, measuring the physical gravity is pretty irrelevant. Believe that is what Ra is saying here. So, going forward, Don says, then the black hole would be a point. Am I correct in saying it would be a point at which the environmental material had succeeded in uniting with unity or the Creator? Is this correct? I am Ra. The black hole which manifests third density is the physical complex manifestation of this spiritual or metaphysical state. This is correct. Questioner, thank you. Then when our planet Earth here goes fully into fourth density, will there be a greater gravity? I am Ra. There will be a greater spiritual gravity, thus causing a denser illusion. So essentially, I think this is describing how all of reality is created by light, and as we ascend through the densities, there's more light within each density, so there's more density. It's more dense with light and with potential to manifest that light. And I think that is because as we build our spiritual gravity, we are pulling that light towards us, within us. And then as positive beings, we then pull that light through us and then radiate that light back outwards. Whereas negative beings pull that light within themselves via their spiritual gravity, but they keep it within themselves. So 2921, Don says, this denser illusion, then, I will assume, would increase the gravitational acceleration above the measured 32.2 feet per second squared that we now experience. Is this correct? I am Ra. Your entities do not have the instrumentation to measure spiritual gravity, but only to observe a few of its extreme manifestations. Questioner, this I know, that we can't measure spiritual gravity, but I was just wondering if the the physical effect would be measurable as an increase in the gravitational constant? That was my question. I am raw. The increase measurable by existing instrumentation would and will be statistical in nature only and not significant. So again, they are intertwined, but the increase in spiritual gravity doesn't really shift our measurable perception of physical gravity until we're at the point when everything begins to coalesce again. So 2923, Dawn says, okay, now as the creation is formed, as the atoms form from rotations of the vibration which is light, they coalesce in a certain manner sometimes. They find distances, interatomic distances from each other at precise distance, and produce a lattice structure which we call crystalline. I am guessing that because of the formation from intelligent energy of the precise crystalline structure, that it is possible by some technique to tap intelligent energy and bring it into the physical illusion by working through the crystalline structure. Is this correct? I am raw. This is correct only insofar as the crystalline physical structure is charged by a correspondingly crystallized or regularized or balanced mind-body-spirit complex. So here we're getting into crystals and the things that crystals can do because of their crystal lattice structure. And Dawn's asking if they have some greater potential to tap into intelligent infinity. And Ross says, yes, that's true. However, to be used in that way, there needs to be a crystallized mind-body-spirit complex wielding that crystalline entity. So we're going to go forward. We're going to talk a little bit more about this. 2924, Dawn says, I don't wish to get off on subjects of no importance or subjects that don't lead us to a better understanding of our mechanism of growth, which lead us to things that are not transient. But it's difficult sometimes to see precisely what direction to go in. I would like to investigate a little bit more this idea of crystals and how they are used. I am assuming then from what you said that in order to use the crystal to tap intelligent energy, it is necessary to have a partially undistorted mind-body-spirit complex. Is this satisfactory, or is this correct? I am raw. This is specifically correct. Questioner. There must be a point at which the removal of distortion reaches a minimum for use of the crystal in tapping intelligent energy. Is this correct? I am raw. This is correct only if it is understood, shall we say, that each mind-body-spirit complex has an unique such point. Questioner. Can you tell me why each mind-body-spirit complex has this unique point of distortion ridding? I am raw. Each mind-body-spirit complex is an unique portion of the one creator. Questioner. Then you are saying that there is no single level of, shall we say, purity required to tap intelligent energy through crystals, but there can be a wide variation in the amount of distortion that an entity may have, but each entity has to reach his particular point of what I might call energizing the ability. Is this right? I am raw. This is incorrect. The necessity is for the mind-body-spirit complex to be of a certain balance, this balance thus enabling it to reach a set level of lack of distortion. The critical difficulties are unique for each mind-body-spirit complex due to the experiential distillations, which in total are the, shall we say, violet ray beingness of each such entity. The balance is what is necessary for work to be done in seeking the gateway to intelligent infinity through the use of crystals or through any other use. No two mind-body-spirit crystallized natures are the same. The distortion requirements, vibrationally speaking, are set. Okay, so here what Ra is saying is that we all have our own unique distortions because we've all lived unique individual lives where certain events have caused certain blockages within our energy body, and those things can't really be specifically laid out before an incarnation, how we're going to react to every single thing that has ever happened to us. Like, that's free will, right? So we build up this very complex, very layered series of distortions, of blockages within our energy body. And so to find balance, we all have to work on ourselves within those specific personal subjective distortions. But there comes a point where once you have balanced and relinquished enough of those distortions, that your energy body, it reaches a vibrational resonance where it is then able to use a crystal to tap into intelligent infinity. So the vibrational point is the same for the threshold that needs to be crossed to be able to use a crystal in that way. But the path there is completely unique for every entity, and every entity who can use a crystal is going to look different. Is still going to have some distortion, and that's going to manifest in various ways. And the way we personally perceive somebody else also manifests in an infinite variety of ways. So every being who can use a crystal isn't going to look or act or have the same blockages or lack of blockages in their energy body. They're all going to have a unique expression of their energy body, but they have to reach a certain point of balancing, of understanding their own mind complex and relinquishing the distortions within their mind to be able to tap into intelligent infinity in any way. But here we're specifically talking about using a crystal, but Ra does say, whatever way you use to tap into intelligent infinity, you have to reach that certain vibrational point. And intelligent infinity is accessing the indigo ray. So I think ultimately that's what they're talking about, is being balanced enough and open enough through the throat chakra to be able to, or even, Ra says that the heart chakra is a springboard, and we can use the heart chakra to springboard into the blue ray and then springboard into the indigo ray. So I think essentially once you are open in the heart chakra and doing the work to crystallize that heart chakra via acceptance and compassion for the self and for all others, and then once you start feeling the ability that your throat, your blue ray, is opening and working, then you are of that vibrational resonance where you can begin to tap into intelligent infinity via the indigo ray and use crystals as an analog, use crystals as an amplifier for that energy. So I think that makes sense. And, Ra refers to the violet ray beingness of each entity. We all have a unique violet ray. And at some point here, Dawn's going to ask about this, but at some point, it's apparent within our violet ray when we've become balanced enough to use intelligent infinity. But again, everyone's still going to have a unique expression of their violet ray, even beings who can use intelligent infinity, who have reached that point of vibrational resonance. They're still going to have a unique violet ray when compared with each other. They're going to be unique. But there is a point where it's recognizable that an entity in their violet ray is vibrationally ready. So let me go ahead and read that. That's the next question here. Dawn says, I see. Then if you are able to read the violet ray of an entity to see that ray, is it possible then to immediately determine whether the entity could use crystals to tap into intelligent energy? I am Ra. It is possible for one of 5th density or above to do this. So again, if we could see the violet ray of everyone, we'd be able to say, oh, okay, that person's balanced enough to access intelligent infinity, and that person's not quite there yet. And that's really the requirement, to be able to use and wield a crystal. So 2929, Dawn asks, is it possible for you to tell me how a crystal is used by an entity who has satisfactorily achieved necessary violet ray qualification, I will say? How is it possible for the entity to use the crystal, or how should he use the crystal? I am Ra. The gateway to intelligent infinity is born of, shall we say, the sympathetic vibration in balanced state accompanying the will to serve, the will to seek. So I find this response from Ra to be very profound and expansive in a lot of ways, because when we open the gateway to intelligent infinity, what we are ultimately doing is what is encompassed under the broad term of healing. We are able to heal distortions, whether they're distortions of the planet, distortions of our own personal mind-body-spirit complex, or distortions of another mind-body-spirit complex that is seeking healing energy. And we can do that in lots of ways. It isn't just literal healing, like when you think of a healer doing Reiki or whatever. It can also be teaching. Teaching heals people, explaining how things work in a way that allows the student to receive that information and work it within their own experiential distortions so that they can understand what's going on within their own energy body in a way that they can start to balance. That's another way of healing. That's another use of intelligent infinity. So the sympathetic vibration in a balanced state accompanying the will to serve, the will to seek. So I think of this a lot. I think of how when somebody is hurting and is experiencing, trauma, a lot of the times our first reaction when somebody communicates that to us is to offer solutions, to try to fix the problem, right? Your partner comes to you and is complaining about a problem at work, and you start thinking logically and practically. Oh, well, maybe you need to talk to your boss. Maybe you need to do this. Maybe these are the actions that you can take. Maybe that could fix that, right? But 99 times out of 100, when a person is complaining about a situation, they're not doing that because they want you to help them find solutions. They're doing that because they want to be heard. They want you to hear them. They want you to vibrate in sympathy with what they're experiencing. And I think a lot of the times we're scared of that because we do that from not a balanced state. So I was saying the gateway to intelligent infinity comes from the sympathetic vibration in a balanced state. But if we have our own distortions and we're triggered by somebody else's need for empathy, we're not going to necessarily find the gateway to intelligent infinity through that interaction. But if we've already done the work to balance and crystallize our own energy body, when somebody brings that to us, when they bring something that needs to be seen, that needs to be empathized with, that then is an opportunity to open that gateway, not just for the self, but for that person too, because that is, again, what healing is somebody who can open the gateway and offer that vibration. So when you vibrate in sympathy with somebody, and then you're balanced enough to not get stuck in that vibration of despair, of anger, of frustration, and then you can slowly shift that vibration to a higher vibration of acceptance and compassion and understanding. You can bring them with you because that's how vibrational resonance works, right? So when you're vibrating in sympathetic resonance in a balanced state, and you have the will to serve and the will to seek, that is essentially what I believe is happening. You step down and you feel what that person feels. You feel their anger, you feel their frustration, and you're not afraid of it because you know how to balance your way out of it. You know how to shift those emotions, those states of consciousness into the higher states of acceptance and compassion. And then you can help them move through that as well. But again, I think we get so afraid of getting stuck there. That's why we just skip the point of sympathetic resonance and we immediately go to offering solutions instead of, getting down there and saying, oh God, that's terrible. I'm so sorry that has happened to you. And asking more questions and getting more into their feelings and really trying to understand where they are. Because then when you are vibrating in sympathy, the other person feels that and recognizes that, right? They feel seen. They feel your empathy. And then they trust you. They trust you to help shift that vibrational frequency to a higher vibrational frequency. And I think of this a lot too because, when we are sick, we do the same thing. We don't actually sit down and listen to what our body is telling us. we immediately seek solutions. Oh, I have a headache, I'm going to take some Tylenol. Oh, I have a stomach ache, I'm going to take some Pepto-Bismol, right? We're just immediately rushing past the communication that is attempting to happen. And then what happens then with our own bodies is we never acknowledge what's wrong. So we're constantly telling our body, oh, you're fine. Here, just take this and you'll be fine. But that may not be true. And the more we do that, the more we build up distortions that we can't look at. But the second we look at our body and say, oh, this is an illness of some sort manifesting. This is a distortion. What is it telling me? What needs to be healed? What can I actually do to heal you? That is alerting the body of the need to seek healing instead of telling the body that it's fine, that you can just keep going and doing what you're doing. And that's what we do 95% of the time, right? We just push through and we tell we ignore our bodies telling us to slow down and listen. And like I said, I think it's the same thing in how we interact with other people. And really, the spiritual work is to get down in there and feel safe doing that. Feel like we're not going to get stuck. Feel like it's okay to spend a certain amount of time in those quote-unquote bad, negative, painful feelings because they're there to tell us something. And they're there to create connection via sympathetic vibration. Whether that's sympathetically vibrating with another person's body and emotions or sympathetically vibrating with our own body and emotions. It's the same thing. There are artificial barriers between all of these things, between our mind and our own mind and our own body, and our body and the bodies of other people. But they're illusory barriers that are between these, and we can push through those. But again, the important thing is from a balanced state. We have to feel safe. We have to know that we can go beyond that and pull ourselves back up into the higher, wider awareness that we gain through balancing. At another point in the future, Ross says that it's very important when you are doing magical work, which intentionally tapping into intelligent infinity is magical work, that you have some recognition and understanding of your own capabilities. And so if you don't feel capable of doing something like that, of actually stepping into another person's emotions and holding space for what they're feeling and really, really empathizing with them, then, you really shouldn't try to do that work consciously if you know that it's quote unquote dangerous for you, because you do have the potential of getting stuck in those negative vibrations because you have too many of your own blockages and distortions that their feelings and experiences are triggering. But if you feel strong enough, if you feel capable enough, and you are pretty sure that you're not deluding yourself about these feelings, that's when it's time to do this kind of work. So yeah, I love that sentence from Ra, just even out of context, not directly related to specifically crystals, because just before this one, Ra says that crystals are just one way to tap into intelligent infinity. The gateway to intelligent infinity is born of, shall we say, the sympathetic vibration in a balanced state, accompanying the will to serve, the will to seek. So I suggest meditating on that one because I think it's juicy. So we'll go forward now. 2930, Dawn says, but can you tell me precisely what the entity would do with the crystal to use it for the purpose of seeking the intelligent infinity? I am Ra. The use of the crystal in physical manifestation is that use wherein the entity of crystalline nature charges the regularized physical crystal with this seeking, thus enabling it to vibrate harmonically and also become the catalyst or gateway whereby intelligent infinity may thus become intelligent energy. This crystal serving as an analog of the violet ray of mind, body, spirit in relatively undistorted form. So essentially, Ra is saying that you charge a crystal, right? If you are balanced and crystallized enough within your own mind-body-spirit complex, then you have the capability of taking a crystalline structure and charging it with intentions. And then that crystalline structure will then work with intelligent infinity to manifest into intelligent energy. So hi, it's Editing Jade here. I don't usually butt in to my recordings to add more, but I just wanted to say a couple more things about this part. What Ra is saying is happening is that you're actually having that sympathetic vibration with the crystal. So once you learn how to vibrate in sympathetic resonance with other beings, other mind-body-spirit complexes, other entities, other objects, you can do that with a crystal and then charge that with whatever vibration that you want to charge it with. So I just wanted to emphasize that Ra's talking about the same mechanism, essentially. This is how we open the gateway to intelligent infinity. We vibrate in resonance with other portions of creation that seem other than us. And because they aren't. And we can choose to do that anytime we want to. And the more we balance ourselves and work on ourselves, the more freedom we have in choosing to do that. So, thank you. I just wanted to make sure that was emphasized. We're going to go ahead and continue the rest of session 29. So, 2931, Dawn asks, is it possible at all for you to instruct us in specific uses of crystals? I am Ra. It is possible. There are, we consider, things which are not efficacious to tell you due to possible infringement upon your free will. Entities of the Confederation have erred in this in the past. The uses of the crystal, as you know, include the uses for healing, for power, and even for the development of life forms. We feel that it is unwise to offer instruction at this time, as your peoples have shown a tendency to use peaceful sources of power for disharmonious reasons. So, here Ra is saying that they really don't want to talk about how to use crystals, because the Confederation has done that before, and we've done terrible things with the power that exists within crystals. And Ra doesn't hold back all information. Ra does give some more information about crystals, but here they say we feel it is unwise to offer instruction at this time. So they really don't want to. They say it is possible, but there's too much potential for the infringement of free will by giving us this information directly. So 2932, Dawn says, I guess what we'd better get to then, now that we have traced the path of creation at least down to the crystalline structure, we'd better concentrate on the evolution of thought and its seeking path to intelligent infinity. We have created, in the major galaxy of the Logos, a very large number of planets. As these planets develop, is it possible for you to give me an example of various planetary developments in what I would call a metaphysical sense, having to do with the development of consciousness and its polarities throughout the galaxy? In other words, I believe that some of these planets develop quite rapidly into higher density planets and some take longer times. Can you give me some idea of that development? I am Ra. This will be the final full query of this session. The particular logos of your major galaxy has used a large portion of its coalesced material to reflect the beingness of the Creator. In this way, there is much of your galactic system which does not have the progression of which you speak, but dwells spiritually as a portion of the logos. Of those entities upon which consciousness dwells, there is, as you surmise, a variety of time-space periods during which the higher densities of experience are attained by consciousness. Does this fulfill the requirements of your query? So I think what Ra is saying here is, again, we've talked about this before, about how when the logos is created, all of the densities are created, essentially, when the quote-unquote Big Bang happens. Everything expands outward, and at that point, all of the densities exist. Some beings begin in first density, some in second, etc. Here, Ra, I think, is saying that our logos has a large portion of it that existed within the seventh density at the beginning of its creation, essentially. It's possible that that's why this logos also has a bias towards kindness, that when it first came into being, there was just a large portion of it that went all the way to the end of the spectrum of advancement through the densities. But everything else then has some progression as it moves towards that end point of the black hole. So I think think that's what Ra's saying in this answer. So 23 to 33, second to last one we've got. Dawn says, I'll study it and possibly have something tomorrow since I don't want to overtire the instrument. The instrument had a question if you have time for a short question, and I will read it. The instrument does not desire to do physical healing work. She already does spiritual balancing by hands. Can she read the private healing material without doing physical healing? I am assuming that she means, can she read it without creating problems in her life pattern? She does not wish to incur lessening of positive polarity. Can she read this material under those conditions? I am Ra. We shall speak shortly due to the fact that we are attempting to conserve this instrument's vital energies during the 3-month period of which we have spoken. This entity has an experiential history of healing on levels other than the so-called physical. Thus, it is acceptable that this material be read. However, the exercise of fire shall never be practiced by this instrument as it is used in the stronger form for the physical healing. Is there any short query before we close? So here we have another reference to the private healing material that Ra requested never be published. And at this point, it was only like session 22, right, where Carla started reading the material at all. And so now we're in session 29. Carla knows that this private material exists. She just wasn't sure if it was okay for her to read it because it is exclusive, right, let's say. And Ra says it's totally fine for her to read it, but she shouldn't do the exercise of fire because it is a type of physical healing which would deplete her vital energy and her physical energy, which she just definitely does not have very much of. But that she already understands on a spiritual level the idea of healing, has already performed healing for people in a non-physical way. And so it's not harmful for her to read this material. And for me, I have read the private healing material, and even like sessions 5 and 6, which is the public version of the healing material, I take that a lot more as personal healing, because you have to heal yourself before you can heal anyone else. And so that's how I see most of it, but Carla's just worried that if she doesn't then become some kind of active physical healer, that would be problematic for her to read the material, because Ra basically says when you take on the honor duty of learning how to heal, you then have to heal. But I do think that means yourself, and in a passive way and not just in a direct way. Again, Carla was always a teacher. Carla wrote books. Carla was able to heal in that way. And so I think learning these balancing exercises, as we refer to them, is really, again, just getting the self into that balanced state so you can reach that sympathetic vibration, so that then you can share a higher vibration with those that you vibrate in sympathy with. So, Carla has like a Wanderer's Handbook and Living the Law of One 101, and it's a lot of information, teachings from Carla based upon things that she had experienced with other people, problems that other people had brought to her, and that she helped talk to them through, or just patterns she would see in the lives of wanderers who would reach out to her and ask for help or guidance in some way. So she was able then, through that sympathetic vibration of empathy for these people who were having these same series of problems that seemed to coalesce around the quote-unquote wanderer identity, she was then able to write these books, which are very helpful. But so, yeah, here Carla is just wondering if she would be violating the honor duty agreement in learning how to be a healer if she didn't actually lay hands on somebody and heal them in a physical way. And I just personally don't think that the idea of a healer is limited to that very specific manifestation of healer. I think there are lots of other ways that you can be a healer, but Ra is saying that specific manifestation of healing, the laying on hands and transferring energy in that way to another person, isn't helpful for Carla, is detrimental for Carla's well-being. We have the final question, 2934. Dawn asks, is there anything that we can do to make the instrument more comfortable or improve the contact? I am Ra. You are conscientious. The entity is well aligned. I am Ra. I leave you now in the love and the light of the one infinite Creator. Go forth, therefore, rejoicing in the power and the peace of the one infinite Creator. Adonai. So, again, no notes. Carla's she's as balanced as she can be. She's sick right now. She has low vital energy, but they're doing everything that they can and should be doing to take care of her. And Dawn was mostly on topic for this session, trying to figure out spiritual principles and not focusing on things that are historical or things that can be measured. So, all was well with the session. Good job. All right, so that is session 29. I hope I did it justice. As you probably can tell, I feel more confident about certain sessions than others. I do think this one had some, like I said, the one citation that I emphasized has always been really important to me, and I think there's just a lot of good metaphysical information in this session. And yeah, I'm just grateful to Ra and Dawn, as always. Grateful to our Creator, grateful to you, grateful to myself, grateful for all of it. And as always, if you have questions or feedback, you can reach out to me, comment, send me an email, reach out. I will do my best to respond in whatever way you're seeking, which is a big ask, but I am here to serve, and I really do love answering questions about the raw material and trying to figure out the law of one. I have the will to serve and the will to seek, and sometimes I have a balanced vibrational state. So I always do my best to wield that in whatever direction I'm called. So thank you, everybody, and I will see you next time. We will be on session 30.